Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Spoilers Sunday video. So this is the time of the week where I take a look at all of the important new cards that were spoiled over this past week and, well, talk about them. But first, before I get into the spoilers, we do have a little bit of a news section that I'm going to be trying to add into the beginning of the videos for anything that's like important that kind of happened. So right now we got a new product announced. Well, we kind of knew it was already a thing, but now it's officially getting announced as the Digimon Gift Box. So what the Digimon Gift Box is it's coming out this winter. It is going to be set to release in December. It's going to be $25, and what it's going to contain is 4 packs of Classic Collection, and then it has a memory case with some memory counters, and then a memory gauge and a promo card. So a very basic product, but it does seem really interesting because we get the Classic Collection packs, and then just a whole bunch of other nice little goodies. I think the promo card is pretty nice, considering it's a reprint of an SR, and this is also going to be the box topper in Classic Collection, which is going to be unfortunate. I hope they do more than just one box topper, so that way this card doesn't just tank in value, but regardless, it's definitely nice to have a reprint of this card in another new art. And then as far as the memory gauge and the memory markers go, I really do like these, and I think they're going to be really nice to just have. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent product, but the interesting thing is that the Classic Collection actually is going to be coming out in January for us. So these cards won't be legal until January, even though we're getting them early in December, just because they have to push the holiday products out, and this actually did get a delay, so we have a little bit more time to spend with BT6. So this extends BT6 by a couple of weeks, so we have like maybe a month and a half at most to experience true BT6, and even then it's not true BT6 because we're getting these starter decks in December, at least for North America. Everywhere else is getting them all on time, so good for them. But I do think that the Classic Collection is going to be a really interesting set to watch out for. I personally think it's going to tank really hard just because it's a smaller set and box sizes are the same, so it all comes down to the pull rates on how easy or hard it is to get certain cards, and because it's a smaller set, you're probably going to end up buying less of it, which is both a good thing for the consumer, but a bad thing in terms of the secondary market, because there's just going to be no value in the cards unless they make the pull rates a little bit harder. But I don't know exactly what they're going to plan on doing, but based on our current pull rates, this set is going to tank really hard, and I wouldn't even touch it with a 10-foot pole if I wasn't a YouTuber, just because I would buy the singles and call it a day, because again, if the pull rates are the same, then it's going to be super easy to buy and to get everything you want, making the singles crash even harder. So it's going to be an interesting set to watch out for, and I do like the cards inside and think that it is a really good thing for the game to have these supplementary sets, but I think that expectations need to be a little bit more realistic when going into it, depending on, again, what the pull rates are going to be for this type of a set, just because if it's a normal pull rate, the set's going to tank. If it's a harder pull rate, I still think the set's going to tank, but it's not going to do as poorly. So there's still more to know about what the Classic Collection is going to entail when it comes out for the English market, but this is just my early speculation. So with all of that news out of the way, let's get into the spoilers. So first up, I'm going to be talking about Submarimon. So Submarimon is another Armor Digimon because he has the Armor Purge ability. He digivolves off of Armadillomon for 2 or Blue for 3, which is pretty okay. He has the natural hard play cost of 4, so a low-costed to play 2-color Digimon could be really good for any Jagresses that he could support. And on top of that, he also has a nice when digivolving ability, where you get to trash the bottom Digivolution source off of one of the opponent's Digimon. Then one of your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it gets minus 3000 DP for the turn. So this just seems like it's a really good early removal card to try to punish the opponent for having a rookie on the field, and that's pretty decent considering there are just lots of hard play rookies that this card can delete, so I think this is going to be a really good card to be using, especially since it also has the Armor Purge ability protecting itself. It has 2 colors to support, 2-color shenanigans, and it has a low play cost if at worst you can't utilize it for any of its other purposes. So I think this is going to be a pretty good card to be using, especially since since we already know blue and yellow have some good synergy with each other. So it's going to be a really interesting deck to see form, and I'm excited to see what direction they're going to go, whether they're actually going to support two-color strategies like this, or if this is just going to be supporting an Armadillomon-based deck. But speaking of two-color strategies, next we have Giga Death. So Giga Death is supporting Imperial Dramon, and what he generally likes to do, because, well, it's a 9-costed blue-green option card with Imperial Dramon Fighter Mode on the face of it. So what this card is doing more specifically is it has the main ability where you get arrest one of the opponent's Digimon, then return up to 10 of the opponent's rested Digimon or suspended Digimon to the bottom of the deck in any order. So that first part is just really, really powerful alone, just because it's acting like a pseudo Nidhoggmon on an option. Yes, it is two colors, and yes, you do have to have both colors on the field in order to use that option card. But with all of the two-color Digimon that are going to be running around after the set, I don't necessarily think that restriction is going to be very hard. So this is just looking to be a very powerful option card to be using. I don't know if it's going to be the main big removal option card, but it seems like it's a really good option card, especially since it has a nice security ability where you get arrest one of the opponent's Digimon, then return one of the opponent's suspended or rested Digimon to the bottom of their deck. So this is just a slightly better Terrace Cluster in security, and it's a slightly worse or better, I don't know exactly how to rate the main ability, but it's still just a very powerful card to be using and thinking about nonetheless. I don't know in the Imperial Dramon deck if this is going to be their main option, but I guess it's definitely an option for them to think about, just because Imperial Dramon has lots of ways of suspending the opponent's Digimon, whether you're using the blue side or the green side or some interesting combination in between. It's still just a good card to think about utilizing nonetheless. Next up, we have Cody. So Cody finally gets to be on a Tamer card, and this is looking to be a pretty okay Tamer card. It's not like anything super interesting, but it's not like a super bad Tamer either. It has the nice ability where at the start of your main phase, if you have a yellow Digimon in play, then you get to gain 1 memory. So it's stating at the start of the main phase, so that's after the raising phase, so it's assuming you're going to be moving your Digimon out of raising, and then you're going to get the memory. So it's still basically around at the beginning of your turn, so you're still going to be gaining the memory to actually like make your plays possible. So I think that's a pretty decent ability to have. And then on top of that, he also has a nice ability where during your turn, when your Digimon with 2 or more colors attacks, then you get to suspend this Tamer to give one of your opponent's Digimon minus 2000 DP for the turn. So we already know yellow is just huge on DP reduction, and DP reduction can stack and add up to lots of very powerful combinations to delete Digimon they generally wouldn't normally be able to delete. So I think this in combination with some of the other cards that we've already seen could make it your Armor Evolutions and Armadillomon based deck really, really powerful. It's also good for just any yellow deck in general that's playing around with 2 colors. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent Tamer to be utilizing, or at least thinking about, just because it is a slightly more efficient Tamer than some of the more generic memory fixing Tamers and duo Tamers we've been playing with before. So who knows how good this card is actually going to be, and if this card is going to see much play, but I definitely like the direction that it's headed in. But speaking of Armadillomon based decks or strategies, next we have Digman. So Digman is going to be a green-yellow Digimon, and he has the evolution cost of evolving for 3 off of green, or off of an Armadillomon for 2. So I think this does actually include the blue Armadillomon as well, so that's just something interesting to think about. And then on top of that, he has your stereotypical Armor Purge ability, because he's an armored Digimon, and on top of that, he has a when attacking ability where one of your opponent's suspended Digimon gets minus 3000 DP for the turn. So he could delete Digimon that are potentially stronger than him, just because we have multiple ways of DP reducing while they're in a suspended state. And on top of that, if you don't even feel like wanting to get rid of a suspended Digimon, like let's just say a rookie attacked your security, live through that check, and now you have an easy way to delete that rookie without even attacking into it, which is just really, really valuable. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting card to be utilizing, and I'm curious and excited to see what the Armadillomon base deck is going to be doing, if that is a deck, or if this is just going to be used as a generic 2-color card to support the green-yellow color combination. Next, we have a new version of Aquilamon. So Aquilamon is another Digimon that's supporting the Jagra side of like what two colors are generally doing, because it has this nice on-play ability where you get to play this card from your hand for one less memory if you have a yellow Digimon in play. So this is acting very similar to what we saw with the Stingmon and XVmon. So it's nice to see that this type of Jagras is getting the support as well. And then on top of that, it also has an inheritable ability where it's a when attacking ability. If you have a yellow Digimon in play, then you get to delete one of your opponent's Digimon with a 5000 DP or less, which we already know that Sylphimon wants to reduce the opponent's DP. So this is good with the new Sylphimon and the old Sylphimon, because of just what the card is doing. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting and solid card to be using for, well, I guess a red-yellow deck. And red-yellow has lots of good support and synergy already, so it's going to be fun to see what people come up with. But speaking of a red-yellow removal type of deck, next we have Yoli. So Yoli is making her appearance similar to Cody. She has very similar stats and very similar abilities. So she does have the ability where at the start of your main phase, if you have a red Digimon in play, then you get to gain one memory. So it is supporting what Cody was supporting, where the idea is you're going to be moving your Digimon out of raising and then she's going to trigger. So you're still getting the memory before you play really any card you could. And then she also has a nice ability where during your turn, when your Digimon with 2 or more colors attacks, you get to suspend this tamer to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less, doing a very similar thing to what Cody's doing, where it's just more removal, and removal on a tamer is actually pretty decent, especially since we already know red and yellow are two color combinations that they want to be playing with each other, so you could actually put Cody and Yoli in the same deck, and I don't think that's necessarily super bad, but it's just going to show the flexibility that two colors could bring to the game when it's done correctly, and I think that between the two of these tamers, it's a nice new direction for tamers to be taking. But speaking of more two-color Digimon, next we have Cyclomon. So even though Cyclomon is the type of two-color Digimon I'm not a super huge fan on, it's still a really good card to be using just because, well, it's a statically generic card. It's digivolving off of red or black. It's counting as both red or black as a level 4, so it's a really good early transition if you want to swap colors, and then you could swap again into another color, digivolving into another two-color Digimon. So there's just lots of ways that you could utilize this card, and then he also has just another static inheritable ability like all of the others we've seen, where it's in when attacking ability, we get to destroy or delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 2000 DP or less. So red really doesn't necessarily care about that just because it's going to be harder for red to trigger this ability. It's not super hard because most of the time a lot of decks want to hard play their rookies to try to dig or search for cards, so it's leaving a rookie vulnerable on the field while they're building one in their racing, so it could pick off that Digimon, which isn't bad, and then black could just de-digivolve the opponent's Digimon to get them to have a Digimon with 2000 DP or less, and then you also have the extension into yellow because red also plays with yellow, so you could start DP reducing it to allow your Digimon to get this ability off. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad inheritable ability. Most of the time, you're just going to be using it just because it's two colors and it's supporting two very strong colors that already have lots of support. And you could even think about, like I said, splashing a third color into the mix to make some really interesting and exciting power plays happen just because this card is a two-color Digimon. But speaking of cards that are supporting the red-black color combination, next we have a new version of Agumon. So this is a black Agumon that's digivolving off of a red or black Digitama, so it's supporting those two colors that way with a nice on-play ability that red or black can use, where it has the on-play ability of revealing the top 4 cards of your deck, then add one Digimon with Greymon in its name and one Digimon with Dragonkin in its trait from among them into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So it's just your stereotypical digger, except this is a slightly better digger because it's looking for potentially 2 cards, and this is just a really good card to think about utilizing in, well, a Greymon-based deck, just because, well, Most of the time, your War Greymons are Dragonkins, and most of the time, you're going to be using lots of low-level or mid-level Greymons just to try to climb the stages with, and I think this is another really good target for Nokia to be playing with, just because you could hardplay Nokia, get this ability off, so I think this is going to be an absolutely fantastic card to be utilizing, especially since we already have lots of support for red-black as a whole. But speaking of more red and black support, next we have a new version of Greymon. So this Greymon also has the ability to digivolve off of a red or black rookie, so it's just a really good card to be utilizing for that purpose alone, on top of the fact that, well, it's a Greymon by name, so it interacts with a lot of our Greymon-based strategies. It has some relatively decent stats, where it's a 5 cost that has 6,000 DP and no real downside to running him. And then on top of all of that, he has a nice inheritable ability where during the opponent's turn, if you have a red Digimon in play, then this Digimon gains blocker, doing a very classic black thing, but as a level 4, so you could use this in combination with some other cards to just form a really powerful Digimon that also could act as a blocker, especially since we have black to be able to give our Digimon reboot. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card to be utilizing all around because of all of its possible synergies and play lines. But next we have metalgreymon. So this new metalgreymon is going to be another red-black synergy card because, well, it digivolves off of red and it digivolves off of black for 4, so it's a little bit more expensive, but the downside is you get 2 really insane abilities that pair up with this card. So what this card is doing natively is he has a when digivolving ability of digivolving 1 on one of your opponent's Digimon, then delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less. So this is a good card to combo with Cyclomon because it de-digivolves and then you could possibly remove one Digimon, then swing with this card to remove another. So it's just a good card to be using all around. And then on top of that, it has an inheritable ability, which is what most people are looking to gain out of this card, where during your turn, while this Digimon has Dragonkin or Machine in its trait, then this Digimon can attack into your opponent's unsuspended Digimon. So this is a really powerful ability for both Dragonkins and Machines to be playing with. So the most obvious thing is people already noticed that you could use this with the BT08, Black War Greymon, to basically swing repeatedly into the opponent's Digimon unsuspended and basically pick off all of their Digimon in a single turn. So that's already really powerful. I don't know exactly how strong that ability is actually going to be, considering if you actually look at the state in which the game is being played in, most of the time, you're not actually having a wide field of Digimon. Most of the time, it's going to be like maybe 1 to 2 Digimon on the field with maybe 1 in the raising. So I don't necessarily think it's like super important to say, oh yeah, this could pick apart the opponent's board when they have like 10 cards on the field. Again, that's probably never going to happen, and if it does happen, then why'd you let it happen? But regardless, it's still a very strong ability to be playing around with for lots of different War Greymons, on top of the fact that it also is supporting Machines. So that's kind of where I'm leaning more towards with this card, is utilizing it with the Classic Collection Machinedramon deck, just because that deck does support red and black, and you could utilize the fact that you could give your Machinedramon piercing and attack into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon and do various other abilities paired up with it. Just makes that look a little bit more appealing than a cheeky combo that probably isn't going to work in practice. But regardless, it's still a very nice and very powerful card to be playing around with, not only just for its 2-color synergy and support, but for all of its other interactions that it could be playing with all of the cards we currently have in the game. But speaking of its intended use, next we have Black War Greymon. So this is the card it's actually supposed to be interacting with, and I think this Black War Greymon is really, really powerful. So I am kind of a fan on 2-color Digimon being at the level 6 and level 7 slot, just because I think compared to level 4s and level 3s, they're not acting as transition Digimon, so you actually have to build your deck around your Mega versus just picking abilities and doing whatever transitions you feel like. So I do feel like 2-color level 6s is totally fine and I'm okay with, and I think they're really fun and exciting when, well, they're this good. So what this card is doing is he is a level 6 black and red Digimon. He could evo off of black and red. He has some pretty decent stats that we've seen multiple times before. Hard plays for 12, evos for 4, and has 12,000 DP, but you're playing him because he has two really strong abilities. So his first ability is a when digivolving ability, where if this card has a red card in its digivolution source, you get to choose an opponent's Digimon, and if there's a black card in this Digimon's digivolution source, then you get to choose one of the opponent's tamers, and then you get to delete any number of the chosen cards with a combined play cost of 6 or less. So this is one of the few cards that's actually interacting with the opponent's tamers. It also could delete Digimon, so I think this is just going to be a very powerful card to be using overall for its when digivolving ability, but its synergy with metalgreymon comes from its other ability, where during all turns once per turn, when your opponent's Digimon are deleted, then you get to unsuspend this Digimon. So that's really good because not only is it triggering during your turn, so the whole intended purpose is you're going to be swinging into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon, deleting that Digimon, then unsuspending this card to get another attack off, but when the opponent's Digimon is deleted during their turn, whether it's by giving him the blocker ability as we saw with the Greymon, or if they hit a card in your security that's a removal option, then he could unsuspend that way. It's still just a very powerful ability to be using just because there's multiple ways this ability can be triggered. And then to cap off this new Black War Greymon line, we have Dark Gaia Force or Terra Destroyer. So this is the big removal card for the black-red color combination. It's the same cost as a Gaia Force, and, well, it's slightly better than Gaia Force. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability where you get to choose any number of the opponent's Digimon with a combined play cost of 15 or less and delete all of the chosen Digimon. So there's not a whole lot of Digimon that aren't a play cost of 15 or more, so the fact that this can basically delete almost any Digimon in the game basically makes it just as strong as Gaia Force, on top of the fact that it can also delete multiple different targets, just makes it slightly better than Gaia Force, but you do have to have both a red and a black Digimon on the field to use it if you're using this card in your hand, but again, with all of the two-color support, that's not going to be hard at all. And then it also has the nice security upside, where you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 15 or less. So it's basically just deleting one Digimon off of the field, and that's still just very, very powerful because, well, it's just basically the same thing as what Gaia Force is doing. Next up, we finally have the last Bancho. It is going to be Bancho Mememon. So Bancho Mememon is not necessarily supporting Banchos. Bancho is just a thing that he is. He's actually supporting and trying to form a Mememon-based deck that we kind of saw with like Catch Mememon and some of the other Mememons. So what this card is doing is he has a nice when digivolving ability where you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and for each of your opponent's Digimon, you may place a card with Mememon in its name among them that have a play cost of 10 or less for free, and then the remaining cards get trashed. So this is kind of acting similar to what Submarimon was doing, where it's just allowing you to play your Mememons instead of just any card off the top that's level 5 or lower. So I think it's a pretty okay ability to have, especially on like a rare level 6. And there are just some very solid Mememons you could play with this card. So obviously it wants you to play like Catch Mememon and the Decoy Mememon. So those are 2 already big cards that you could synergize with this card. And then on top of that, he also has another ability where during all turns, if you have another Digimon with Mememon in its name, then this Digimon gains security attack +1, so it allows him to hit even harder than he normally would be as long as you're playing into that Mememon-based strategy. So I think like with the more Mememons that come out, the more powerful this card becomes, and the more a Mememon deck actually starts to form. But based on how this card is worded with the Mememon being a play cost of 10 or less, so we could see King Mememon later on, not in the set, but like later on in the game. So I don't think it's going to be interacting with that, but it's nice to think that they are trying to support a Mememon-based deck, even though I think that deck is not good, and I would have rather had this card be like a more generic card like Bancho Golemon, where you actually could kind of try to form a Bancho-based deck out of it. So while that part is a little bit unfortunate, I don't necessarily hate the card. It's just I'm not super keen on Mememons being a strategy that's going to be actually good. Next up, we have Kyukimon. So Kyukimon is, well, just a generic vanilla card that just so happens to be yellow and purple. Nothing too spicy or special about it. It evos for 3, has a 9000 DP, hard plays for 7, and, well, is just both colors. So it's just an easy transition card to use if you're playing into the yellow-purple color combination, or just want to use a generic card for that color combination to try to swap into either yellow or purple, depending on how you're building the deck and what you want to gain out of the deck. So it's just acting as a solid transition Digimon to be using. Next up, we have Pandemonium Flame. So Pandemonium Flame is actually a pretty powerful 2-cost option card. So what this card is doing for 2 is it's a purple option with the main ability where you get to delete one of your Digimon to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon whose level is equal to or less than the deleted Digimon. So this is basically acting similar to Deathclaw, except it has a little bit more flexibility than Deathclaw at the same time with its own sets of restrictions. So it's just another decent option card for purple to add to its overall toolkit. And then it has a nice security ability that allows you to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon, and this is probably the strongest part of the card. The self-sacrificing part is always nice, just because we do have lots of on-delete abilities and some self-sacrificing synergies, but the fact that its security ability just allows you to delete an unsuspended Digimon outright is still just very strong for this level of option. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card to be using, especially with all of the unsuspending that's going to be going on. It allows you to use a card like this to try to pick out those types of abilities and delete those types of Digimon. Next up, we have a new tamer in the form of Oikawa. So Oikawa is a 3-cost purple tamer, so it's a pretty decent and pretty efficient tamer to play compared to some of the others, with a really good interaction and upside to actually wanting to use them, especially for a Myotismon-based deck. So what this card is doing is he has the All Turns ability, where one of your Digimon with Myotismon and its name is deleted, then you get to suspend this tamer to gain 1 memory. So we already have some Myotismon support all the way back in the Classic Collection, so this could be good in combination with that. It could be good in combination with the old Mallow Myotismon, and the fact that he's referring to Myotismon in his other ability means that we're probably going to be getting a secondary Mallow Myotismon that we could be using in combination with this card, because his second ability states where at the end of the opponent's turn, if this tamer is suspended, then you could play 1 Mallow Myotismon from your trash for free by deleting this tamer. So the two abilities play nicely with each other, whether the Digimon is going to be during your turn or the opponent's turn. Purple has lots of ways to set up their trash, especially now with all of the new discarding that they got all the way back in BT06 and BT07. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be super hard to be able to trigger this ability off to just be able to replay and keep playing your Mallow Myotismons, especially since we do have various other cards that interact with tamers in purple. So who knows what kind of weird or interesting purple deck is going to be forming, just because purple as a whole is a very combo-centric color, just because everything tends to mesh and synergize with each other relatively nicely. So this could be a good tamer-based deck that's just playing Mallow Myotismons. This could be used in a more Myotismon-centered deck. So there's already multiple different ways we could think about playing this card, making him just a pretty interesting card to be thinking about utilizing. But speaking of Mallow Myotismons, we have a new Mallow Myotismon. So this Mallow Myotismon is actually looking to be pretty good because of all of the different ways that he could be played. So obviously him being a Mallow Myotismon means we could use Aquilamon and Mememon to synergize with this card and have them be able to play this card for free in the ways Aquilamon and Mememon want to be played. Then we have the new tamer to be able to play this card, and then we actually could evo into this card with no real downside to doing so, and this card actually has a when digivolving ability we could actually utilize if we are trying to evo up into him. So its when digivolving ability states we get to trash the top 5 cards of our deck, then if we have a card with Myotismon in its name in our trash, then we get to gain 1 memory. So that's just allowing this card to basically evo for 3 instead of 4, making him memory efficient, because a lot of your evolutions are based off of 3 memory when you're getting to your level 5s or higher, so that just makes it actually well playable. And then on top of that, he has a really nice on-play ability when we cheese him onto the field, where his on-play ability states if we have 5 or more cards with Myotismon in their name in our trash, then we get to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon and trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So playing into a more Myotismon-based deck just means that he acts as a really solid Digimon to try to remove the opponent's Digimon and burn their security all at the same time, just making the card really interesting to use, not only just with the Malomyotismon that we had before, because he's interacting with Digimon just being deleted outright, but we could use him, like I said, in a more Myotismon-based deck. Even if that Myotismon-based deck is more about retaliation, that just adds to the overall depth and diversity that we could think about utilizing this card and how we could play this card. But speaking of something that's getting multiple directions, next we have BBman. So this BBman is actually a green Digimon. It looks like the Pulsemon line is getting a color shift from yellow to green, and what this card is doing is he has the inheritable skill, where during the opponent's turn, while all of your Digimon are suspended, this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP. So I kind of think this is a really bad inheritable, and we'd rather just use other cards just because there's nothing really in green to support this type of a strategy. It seems like it wants to be playing with Digisorption just because we could suspend our own Digimon, but it's easier just to attack with our own Digimon, and even then, what's the benefit of having our suspended Digimon have the extra 1000 DP other than making it hard for the opponent to attack into us? Most of the time, they're going to have a larger Digimon than what their stats are, just because of all of the different abilities and DP boosts that they could be playing with their Digimon to make theirs stronger than ours. So I'm not super fan of what this card is doing, and I think this is one of Green's worst Digitamas, but let's just wait and see to see what the support this card brings to actually make this ability good, if it actually is even going to be good. So next up, we have the green Pulsemon. So Pulsemon actually is making the color shift based on his different evolutions, it seems. So who knows, we actually might get like a red Pulsemon or a blue Pulsemon based on his other various evolutions. I don't actually know if that's going to be the case, but that would be pretty cool if it was, just because Pulsemon is a pretty popular Digimon for being a newer Digimon. But what this Pulsemon is doing for green is he has the inheritable skill, where during all turns, this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP for each of your other suspended Digimon. So this is a little bit better of an ability to be supported by the Digisorption strategy, just because now your Digimon actually is getting more meaningful buffs. But again, they could just start picking apart the suspended Digimon to make your Digimon weaker. So even though it is slightly better than BBman, it's still just not that great of an inheritable to be playing around with, because your other Digimon need to be just as strong as the one you're playing in order for this ability to actually be relevant and it matters. Just because there is just that much removal in the game, and there's just that much really powerful Digimon running around, where I don't think this is going to matter too much. But it seems like I was kind of correct on my assertion that it wants to be playing with the Digisorption ability, because we see it here on Pistomon. So Pistomon is one of the evolutions in the Pulsemon line, but what this card is doing is it has the Digisorption 2 ability. So note, this is the level 5 and not the level 4. We don't have the level 4 yet, but the fact that this is playing with Digisorption 2 means that they actually took a lesson from their mistakes in the past and not putting it at Digisorption 3, so you actually still have to pay a cost to Digivolve this Digimon on top of suspending one of your Digimon. And then on top of that, Digisorption 2 ability, which actually could also play with Sarismon. You also have a nice inheritable skill where during all turns this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP for each of your other suspended Digimon. So it's just another Pulsemon DP boost ability that I don't think is super great. So again, I'm not super high on this line so far, considering it's a weaker Digisorption than what we had in the past, and the inheritable doesn't really seem to matter based on the current state of the game. So again, I'm not super high, and I don't know how good this is actually going to be in the long run. But we actually do have his Mega, and his Mega seems to be really, really powerful. So I don't necessarily know if I'd use the rest of his line to support the Mega, but I get where they're going with this, and again, we still are missing that level 4 to kind of tie everything together, but I don't necessarily know if that level 4 is actually going to matter or not. So what this Digimon is it is Shivaman. So Shivaman is a green level 6 that hard plays for 12, evos for 4, and has 12,000 DP. So your usual stat line for a lot of level 6s. and then on top of that, he has two really good abilities. So his first ability is during the opponent's turn, while all your Digimon are suspended, then your opponent can't use option cards. So this is a really big deal because it turns decks like Security Control offline, just because they won't actually be able to hard play their options to remove your threats, so that way you could just try to have your threats, well, be threatening. And then on top of that, he has another ability where during your turn, while this Digimon unsuspends in the unsuspend phase, then you get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So not only is he just making it hard for decks like Security Control to even play their options to remove your Digimon, because they're not playing usually strong enough of Digimon where they actually can attack into your Digimon and clear it, but on top of that, he's also burning the opponent's security every time he's going to be unsuspending at the start of your turn, which is a really big deal because half of what Security Control is doing is playing their options from their security as well. So having the ability to basically just shut them out of what their game plan is going to be very, very powerful. Again, in the grand scheme of things with where the current state of the game is headed, I don't actually know if this card is actually going to be that good or not, but it's definitely a really nice card to think about just because it's not hard to suspend all your Digimon, especially if he's the only Digimon out, or if you have one other Digimon out, it wouldn't be hard to suspend that one Digimon either. So I think this is going to be a pretty good card, even if the rest of his support is kind of not exactly there. But the whole idea behind the card is you're just going to be building him up with all of the DP boosts to make it very hard for the opponent to attack into him. And then because the opponent's going to have to attack into him to clear him, they're going to have to not rely on their options in order to clear them. So it just makes him a little bit stickier and a little bit harder to deal with as long as you have other Digimon. So again, I don't know how good this card's going to be in the long run, but it definitely seems like a very powerful card to be working with. And then the last card that we got revealed over this past week is going to be Betsumon. So Betsumon is, well, he's a very interesting looking character, and he has a very powerful ability. So what this card is doing is he has a when Digivolving ability, you get to trash out one card from your hand, and then if you do, this Digimon is treated as the color of the Digimon you trashed for the turn. Then if this Digimon has 2 or more colors, then you get to draw 2 cards. So not only is it going to act as whatever secondary color you want it to be, it's going to be drawing you a replacement card and a card on top of that, and a card for Digivolving into this card. So it's drawing you 3 cards for discarding 1 and Digivolving into this card. So I think this card is going to be absolutely insane for any deck that's using yellow or could use yellow to transition into various other colors. And I think this card is going to be one of the more powerful cards that's going to act as a way to transition into whatever mega you want to be using, just because this card actually allows you to do that. And because 2-color Digimon also count as 2 colors, then you get a use this with those 2-color Digimon as well to make it transitioning and playing multiple colors even easier through basic evolution. So this is the type of card that I'm not super huge and thrilled with when it comes to playing around with 2 colors. I'd rather have something more hard-locked to what we saw with metalgreymon, where you're really only gaining benefit in a very specific style of deck that could be done in 2 to 3 different ways, rather than a card that's just generically decent to use for basically any 2-color deck that could use yellow. So we already have lots of transitions into yellow, and yellow can transition into a lot of other colors now thanks to this card, and I think that this card is going to be a very good card to be using for only being a common in the set. So that's all of the spoilers that we had this week, and it was a very jam-packed week with lots of powerful cards. I'm still kind of cautiously optimistic on 2 colors as a whole, just because we see them doing it right and we see them doing it wrong all at the same time, and I don't know if going forward they're going to continue this 2-color Digimon trend. I really hope they don't, because the more 2-color Digimon we get, the easier it will be to transition into colors, and the less colors will actually matter at the end of the day. But that's just my own personal opinion. I do think that level 6s that are 2 colors are pretty decent and fun to be playing around with, and those are the types of 2-color Digimon I actually enjoy, because you actually have to think about the deck that you're going to be building them with, rather than just playing whatever colors you feel like and playing the transitions just to make it work. So I'm okay with 2 colors, more so on the level 3s and level 6s, because those are the colors where it doesn't really matter the most. And then the level 5s and the level 4s, I'm more cautious about, because those are the transition colors to allow you to basically play whatever colors you feel like you want, depending on what support there is and what your build is going to be looking like and what you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be really fun to experiment with multiple different colors, just because, well, it adds more deck diversity and depth to deck building. And, well, me being a huge deck builder, that's usually a good thing. But again, I'm going to be very cautious, because two colors also could start limiting design space, just because now they have to think about how color pairings are actually going to be interacting with each other to try to make sure a Digimon doesn't have a busted ability it's not supposed to be having. So I do think while it does increase the amount of decks that could be made, it also decreases the amount of design space, because now they have more interactions to be looking out for when making and designing cards. So that's my biggest fear when it comes to two-color Digimon, is just that aspect of what two-color Digimon bring. And, well, as fun as it seems, we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out, because I don't think one set is going to kill the game. And there's just a lot of unknowns that we don't know, whether if this is going to be a good thing for the game or a bad thing for the game in the long run. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.